Hello everybody, TapScreen Gaming here, and today we've got an updated tier list for X-Samkok. After I've got some more time in the game, I've made some changes to the previous tier list, so let's just get right into it. So we've got 5 rows here. The meta one is going to be the best team that I see a lot of people using and that I'm trying to use. SS is going to be your main characters that you're going to be using. S tier, you can use them, but you want to upgrade to the SS tier as soon as you can. You got the F tier for food, and this question mark tier is going to be for one specific character that I'm not exactly sure where to put him because he can work and he can suck. So let's get right into it. Zhong He is going to SS tier. He has good single target damage and he's got a bunch of extra basic attacks with lifesteal. Liu Bei is going into the S tier. He does 80% damage to 3 targets and he can stack bleed. Tai Shi Si is also going to S tier. Does good single target damage, 360%. And he can self-shield and inflicts burns on the enemy team. Zhu Liang is going to the meta tier. He's got rage gen and he can buff teams as well as heal them. Lady Zen is going into S tier. She's an alright healer. She heals front row and she's got enemy rage reduction even though it's a small amount. Jian Wei is also going into S tier. He's got alright single target damage at 265%. He also buffs and shields allies. Chao Ren's going into food tier. Xiao Hu Dun is actually going into S tier this time. He does 170% damage to a column, and he also self-buffs defense, which also damages any enemies that attack him. Sima Yi going into S tier. He has 300% single target damage, and he poisons the enemies, and then also after you star him up, he can do splash damage, like overflow damage, after he kills an enemy. It'll damage the enemies around him. Guan Yu going into SS tier. 360% single target damage, plus he heals himself for 90% of the damage, so he's got good survivability and good damage. Zhang Fei, also going to SS tier. He also does pretty good single target damage at 310% with a 30% damage heal, but what makes him really good is he does an invincible shield on 2 allies, so they can't take any damage at all. Cao Cao's going into the meta tier. He's got decent rage gen and also rage steal from the enemy team, and he buffs your team. Dian Wei is going into food. Zhu Liang, meta tier for sure. He's got insanely massive damage. He can wipe out entire teams. I've seen it. Mine does it once in a while if I got enough rage on him. I just need another character to add to my roster and he'll be really overpowered. Guo Jia is going into food, see no reason to use him. Zhao Yun going into the S tier. He does pretty good damage, 195% to a column. He's got a self-damage buff after he uses his skill, and he can do extra basic attacks. You could almost put him in SS tier, but everybody in here outshines him. Zhou Yu going into the food tier. Huan Yeying going into the S tier. Once we get further on into the game, she's probably going to be moving up into SS tier just because of her magic shield. But she purifies status ailments. She magic shields 2 allies that resist status ailments, and from what I've seen, this magic shield is going to become more and more important as the game goes on. But for now, she's an S tier. Sun Si is also going into S tier. He's got a 70% damage AoE, but he can cast it up to 3 times, which is up to 210% damage if he gets them all. He also self-buffs on enemies taking burn damage. Sun Quan's actually going into SS tier. The only reason being he can do up to 450% single target damage. That is nuts. Xiao Qiao, that's the one I'm talking about that I'm working on, going to the meta tier. Simply for her rage gen. You want to stack up as much rage as you can on Zhang Lao. He needs over, I think, 14 rage, and then his skill attacks the entire enemy team. Huang Gai going into food. Da Qiao, also food. Lu Zun, food. Yuan Shao, food. Dong Zhou, actually going into S tier. His lower damage at 180% single target, but he self-shields himself for 70% of his own HP, and then he gains shield every time he takes damage, so he's actually a pretty decent tank. Zuo Si, going into the meta tier, dispels buffs on enemies and reduces their rage. As you can see, this whole team is built around increasing rage for Zhang Lao and decreasing enemies' rage by using Zuo Si and Cao Cao. Got Yu Ji going into food, Lu Bu going into S tier. He's a 90% damage AoE, plus a basic attack follow-up, and he can counterattack quite often. Gongchen Zhan going into the food tier, and then Ma Chao is going into the unknown tier. I know a lot of people put him in F or higher up. I'm not exactly sure where to put him because even though he's stuns himself for 2 turns after using his skill. The skill does do 120% damage AoE, which is high already. But once you star him up more, any extra rage can increase the damage by up to 50%. So you're at 192% damage for the AoE right there. And then at Fame 3-star, it has 10% damage, and Divine adds 10% more damage if the targets are over 80% HP. So if you're building more of like a nuke team, he can deal out quite a bit of damage in the first turn. Kinda similar to Zhang Liao. So depending on your team, he could be SS tier, or he could be food tier. It's all up to you. Hua Tuo going into S tier. She heals all your allies and has a heal over time. She can also revive and does the magic shield, just like Huan Yeying. So as the game progresses, she can actually move up because that magic shield is supposed to be pretty important. Next we got Dao Chan going into the SS tier. And right now that's simply because of her Bewitch. Enemies that are bewitched cannot attack or gain rage. That's really, really big. She could also fit into your meta tier, depending if you want to use her or Zhang Fei, or even Zhang He. Next we got Guan Yu, the demon version. He's going into meta tier. He's got really high single target DPS at 360%. He also heals for 90% of the damage. He's got a self buff for 15% attack when he enters battle. But the main reason why he's in here are his passives from the Martial Soul. I'll throw them up on screen right now. You can pause and take a look. Should be pretty self-explanatory. And then last is Demon Lubu, going into SS tier. While he's not that great for an IMT, you gotta put him above the regular version because he does have a 15% attack buff added on from what the regular version does. 90% damage AoE plus basic attack and counters, and then his Martial Soul as well, which I'll throw up on screen right now. Pause and take a look if you want. And yeah, that's the new tier list from my point of view. If you put anybody higher or lower, let me know down in the comments below, and thank you for watching. See ya.